The recording was 11 seconds long, and the coordinator of the 13th listening station played it 40 times before she admitted she did not understand it. It was not a weapon. That was the first thing the analysts ruled out. It was not a transmission meant for them, either. The humans had not known they were being watched when they made it. It was an internal channel, ship to ship, low priority, the kind of signal a civilization leaves unencrypted because it assumes nothing worth stealing would ever travel through it. The coordinator's people had intercepted thousands of such fragments from the human convoy since it first drifted into contested space. Cargo manifests, navigation chatter, a song once, sung badly by someone who did not know the harmonic was off. The humans were poor, slow, and loud, and the listening station cataloged them the way one catalogs weather. But this fragment was different, and the coordinator could not say why. A human voice said, "Tell them we left the door open." That was all. No context. No reply. 11 seconds of silence afterward, the kind of silence that is not empty but waiting. The coordinator, whose species the galaxy knew as the Veil, had spent 200 years learning to read the spaces between words in 11,000 languages, and she could not read this one. Left the door open. For whom? Which door? And why did the voice sound? She searched for the word in her own tongue and found none. Why did it sound relieved? She filed it. She should not have. But she filed it under the designation her people reserved for anomalies they intended to forget, and she went home, and she did not sleep. That was the beginning, though no one would understand it as a beginning until much later. By then the question had grown teeth. The humans were not supposed to be in contested space at all. The conquered, the loose, ancient alliance of the galaxy's ruling powers, the Veil and the Thren and the cold mathematical Ibori, and 4 others who rarely spoke, had drawn the borders long before humanity learned to leave its own gravity well. The borders were not lines. They were agreements about who was allowed to lose. When 2 minor species fought, the conquered permitted it, observed it, and harvested the results, because conflict was data and data was the only currency that had never devalued in 9 million years of galactic civilization. The conquered did not rule through fleets. It ruled through knowing. It knew how every species would behave in every circumstance, because it had watched 10,000 species rise and it had categorized them all, and the categories had never once been wrong. Humanity had been categorized in under a decade. The file was thin. High emotional volatility, poor long-term planning, strong pair bonding instinct exploitable for leverage, tolerance for loss, low, projected behavior under existential pressure, capitulation or fragmentation within 3 generations. The Ibori who maintained the master taxonomy had assigned humanity a designation that translated roughly as transient, a species that would not last, a weather pattern. So when the human colony at Housegrove refused to evacuate, the conquered was not alarmed. It was curious, the way a researcher is curious when an experiment produces a result slightly outside the margin of error. Housegrove sat on the edge of a Thren expansion corridor. The Thren had requested the world. The conquered had granted it, as it always did, and had informed humanity that the colony of 9,000 people would need to relocate within 1 orbital cycle. This was not cruelty. The Thren needed the system star for a stellar lifting project that would feed 11 worlds. 9,000 against 11 worlds was not a difficult calculation. It was not a calculation at all. The humans said no. The Thren ambassador, a being named Oz Ket who had negotiated 41 such relocations without a single failure, found this so unexpected that he assumed it was a translation error. He sent a clarification. The humans confirmed, no. He sent a second, more detailed explanation of the consequences, the loss of conquered protection, the loss of trade routes, the eventual loss of the world anyway, because the Thren could simply wait until the colony starved and take it empty. The humans replied with a single sentence that Oz Ket would later quote to a tribunal, his voice shaking in a way his species had no name for. Then you'll have to come in and watch us not leave. Oz Ket did not understand it. None of them did. It sounded like surrender phrased as defiance, or defiance phrased as a joke. The Concord's behavioral models could not place it. The models predicted that a cornered species either fights or flees, and the Housegrove humans were doing neither. They were staying. They were planting. The listening station's orbital imagery showed human agricultural teams expanding their fields, as though preparing for a harvest that the Thren fully intended to incinerate. The coordinator of the 13th listening station, watching those fields grow, remembered the 11-second fragment and felt something move in her chest that she would not name until it was too late to matter. Tell them we left the door open. She began to watch Housegrove personally. This was the first mistake the Veil made, though they would make many, and it was the smallest. She told herself she was gathering data. She was, in fact, becoming the thing the Concord had spent 9 million years building itself never to become. She was becoming interested in an outcome she could not predict. The woman at the center of Housegrove was named Adiz Okonkwo, and she was not a soldier, a leader, or a hero. She was a soil ecologist. The coordinator learned this slowly, from intercepted personnel files, and from the way the other humans spoke to her, not with deference but with the particular weary trust that people give to someone who has been right about something painful for a long time. Adiz had been the one who tested Housegrove's ground when the colony was founded and found it wrong. Subtly wrong. The soil held something, a microbial structure the human instruments could measure but not explain, and Adiz had spent 6 years studying it instead of leaving when the funding dried up and the other scientists went home. The coordinator did not know what the soil held. She only knew that Adiz did, and that Adiz had not told the Concord, and that this silence was the second thing about humanity she could not read. The first Thren warships arrived at Housegrove on the 91st day. They did not fire. The Concord's protocols required a final observation period before any minor species was removed, not out of mercy but out of thoroughness, because the moment of a species breaking was the most valuable data it would ever produce. Oz Ket commanded the observation. He expected the breaking to be quick. Instead, he watched the humans build a school. It made no sense. With 3 warships in their sky, with the calculation of their deaths now visible to the naked eye, the humans of Housegrove laid a foundation and raised walls, and brought their children into a building that any reasonable species would have understood was about to be ash. Oz Ket's analysts told him the humans had lost cohesion, that this was the fragmentation the Ibori had predicted, the irrational behavior of a doomed people refusing reality. Oz Ket reported this. The Concord recorded it. Housegrove humans exhibiting terminal denial, projected collapse, imminent. This was the first catastrophic misreading, and the coordinator caught it before anyone else because she had been listening longer. The humans were not in denial. She intercepted Adiz's voice on the same low-priority channel as the door fragment, speaking to a child, and the child had asked if they were going to die, and Adiz had said, "Not today. And every day we make them wait is a day we win. So we're going to make them wait a very long time. Make them wait." The coordinator turned the phrase over and over. The Thren could destroy the colony in an afternoon. Waiting was a choice the Thren would make, not the humans. Unless, and here the coordinator's thoughts entered territory the Concord's models did not map, unless the humans understood something about Thren psychology that the Thren did not understand about themselves. Unless making them wait was the weapon. She sent a private query to the Ibori taxonomists, asking whether the human file accounted for the possibility that humans might weaponize observation itself. The Ibori did not answer for 9 days. When they did, the answer was a single character that translated as no and a second character that translated as Y. The coordinator did not reply. She did not have an answer. She only had the growing sense that she was watching a door close behind her, and that the humans had been the ones to open it, and that she had walked through without noticing. On the 110th day, Ket gave the order to begin the removal. The conquered had grown impatient. The data from Housegrove had become repetitive, and repetitive data was worthless. 3 Thren dropships descended toward the colony's edge, carrying not weapons but extraction teams, because the conquered preferred to relocate rather than kill when relocation was cheaper, and 9,000 panicked humans would be cheaper to herd than to bury. The dropships landed in the fields Adiz had spent 6 years studying. What happened next was recorded by every instrument the listening station possessed, and the coordinator would replay it for the rest of her life. The Thren extraction teams disembarked. They moved into the human crops, and within 4 minutes all 3 teams stopped responding. Not dead. That was the horror of it, the thing that turned the conquered's curiosity into the first cold thread of fear. The Thren were not dead. Their suits reported normal vital signs. But they had stopped moving, stopped speaking, and when Ket ordered a second team down to recover them, the second team found the first standing motionless among the human crops, their sensory organs locked open, their bodies trembling. They had walked into the fields, and something in the fields had reached into them and paused them, and the humans had simply watched it happen from their unfinished school, and not one human had lifted a weapon, because they had not needed to. The soil. The coordinator understood it then, or thought she did. Whatever Adiz had found in the ground 6 years ago, the humans had not removed it. They had cultivated it. They had spent 6 years learning to grow the one thing in the galaxy that could touch a Thren mind, and they had planted it in rows, and called it a farm, and let the conquered photograph it 1,000 times while it grew, and no one had asked what the crop was for because no one believed humans were capable of that kind of patience. This was the rehook, though the coordinator did not know to call it that. Because the moment she understood the fields, she understood something far worse. The humans of Housegrove had known from the first day that the Thren would come. They had not refused to evacuate out of stubbornness. They had refused because the entire colony, the school, the crops, the song sung badly on an open channel, the child being told not today, all of it was bait. Housegrove was not a colony that had been cornered. Housegrove was a trap that had spent 6 years pretending to be a colony, and the conquered had spent 6 years pretending to study it, and the humans had let them, because being underestimated was the only resource a transient species had, and they had spent it with terrifying precision. Tell them we left the door open. The door was Housegrove. The humans had wanted the Thren to come in. The conquered did not panic immediately. This is important to understand, because the panic, when it came not from the loss of 3 extraction teams, but from what the loss revealed about everything that had come before. The Ibori convened an emergency taxonomy review. They pulled the human file. They began to re-examine every recorded human behavior of the past decade through the new lens, that humans might be capable of planning across timescales the conquered had assumed were beyond them, and worse, capable of hiding that planning behind exactly the kind of emotional volatility the conquered had used to dismiss them. The poor planning, the capitulation, the fragmentation. What if none of it had been real? What if humanity had read the conquered's models, had somehow inferred the categories the galaxy used to sort the small species, and had performed transients the way an actor performs a death perfectly for years, waiting for the audience to lean in close? The Ibori could not prove this, but they could no longer disprove it, and for a species whose entire civilization was built on the certainty of disproof, the inability to disprove was a wound. The coordinator requested permission to make contact with Adiz Okonkwo directly. The request was denied, then denied again. Then, after the Thren recovered their paused teams and discovered the soldiers could not be woken, that whatever the fields had done to them was permanent, that 3 Thren warriors would stand trembling and open-eyed for the rest of their lives. The request was approved with a speed that betrayed how frightened the conquered had become. The coordinator was to learn what the humans wanted. The conquered assumed they wanted something. Every species wanted something. The wanting was the handle by which the small ones were held. She descended to House Grove alone in a single unarmed shuttle, and Adiz met her in the fields. The coordinator had expected a tactician. She found a tired woman with dirt under her fingernails who looked at the veil with an expression the coordinator's translator rendered as grief, though that could not be right because the humans had won. Adiz led her between the rows of the crop that had broken 3 Thren mines, and the coordinator's own instruments told her there was nothing dangerous here, nothing chemical, nothing that should touch a veil at all. She asked, because she had to, what the crop did. Nothing, Adiz said. It's barley. The coordinator did not understand. The thing in the soil isn't in the plants, Adiz said. It's in the ground. We didn't grow a weapon. We grew a reason to stand still. The Thren came into the fields because we made the fields look like the thing they came for. Then the ground did what it does. She knelt and pressed her palm flat against the dirt. Do you know what it is? The thing in the soil, the coordinator said no. This was the second mystery still unanswered, and she had come precisely to answer it. Neither do we, Adiz said. Not really. We know what it does to a mind that's never felt it before. It shows you the whole of your own life at once. Every choice. Every cost, all of it all together with nowhere to look away. A human mind learns to survive that barely over years the way you survive grief, but the Thren have never grieved. Their minds aren't built to hold the weight of a single life seen whole, so they stop. They just stop. She stood, brushing the dirt from her hands. We didn't make them suffer. We made them understand something, and they weren't strong enough to keep walking afterward. That's all. That's the whole weapon. The truth applied to people who have never had to carry it. The coordinator felt cold travel through a body that did not normally feel cold, because this was the thing the conquered had never categorized, the variable that broke the models, and Adiz was saying it plainly, the way one might explain weather. Humans had spent 6 years learning to live inside something that paused the Thren instantly. The advantage was not the soil. The soil was everywhere. The coordinator's instruments would later confirm that the same microbial structure existed on 1,000 worlds, ignored by everyone, because every other species had learned to stay away from it the moment it touched them. Only humans had stayed. Only humans had walked into the thing that showed you your whole life and had kept walking, day after day, year after year, until they could plant crops in it and raise children beside it and use it like a fence. The advantage was not the weapon. The advantage was that humans could survive what they were weaponizing. The coordinator returned to her station and wrote a report that the Ibori initially refused to enter into the taxonomy because it could not be expressed in the taxonomy's terms. The report said, "The humans have not found a weapon we lack. They have found a suffering we cannot endure. The two are the same thing." The conquered, faced with this, made its third catastrophic misreading, and it was the worst of them, because it came from the most intelligent species in the galaxy acting on the best information they had. The Ibori concluded that House Grove was a singular event, a freak conjunction of a unique soil and a uniquely stubborn colony. The solution was containment. Quarantine the world, designate it forbidden, and never again allow humans near the microbial structure now classified as a Tier 1 hazard. The conquered issued the order. They were proud of it. It was rational, proportionate, and decisive. It treated the symptom, the soil, and ignored the disease because the disease was unthinkable. The disease was that humanity had, in surviving House Grove, learned what it was. The coordinator understood this slowly, then all at once, on the day Adiz's last transmission reached her. The humans of House Grove were dying. Not from the Thren had withdrawn, terrified of the fields, but from the thing they had cultivated. Living beside it for 6 years had cost them. The coordinator's instruments, which had read nothing dangerous to avail, had failed to read what the soil did to humans across time. It did not pause them. It wore them down. Every day in the fields, every harvest, every child raised in the shadow of the thing that showed you your whole life, it accumulated. The humans aged wrong. Their minds, which could survive the weight that broke the Thren, could not survive carrying it forever. Adiz was 41 years old and her body was failing like a woman of 90, and she had known this would happen from the first day, and she had stayed anyway, and so had all 9,000 of them. This was the cost the conquered had not seen, because the conquered measured strength as the capacity to win, and had no instrument for the capacity to lose on purpose, slowly, with full knowledge, as a strategy. "Tell them we left the door open," Adiz had said in the 11-second fragment, on the first day the coordinator ever heard a human voice she could not read. The coordinator finally understood the words. The door was not Housegrove. The door was the soil itself. The humans had found the thing the entire galaxy had spent 9 million years fleeing, the truth that broke minds, the unbearable weight of a single life seen whole, and instead of fleeing it, they had moved in. They had made a home inside the one place the ruling powers could never follow, and they had left the door open behind them not as an invitation but as a message. We can go where you cannot. We can survive what you cannot survive. And we did it on purpose while you watched and called us weather. Adiz's last transmission was not to the coordinator. It was to the children of Housegrove who were being evacuated at last, not by the Thren but by other humans, a relief convoy that had come not to save the colony but to learn from it, to carry the knowledge of the soil to 100 other worlds where the same microbial structure waited, ignored in the ground. The humans were not quarantining the soil. They were spreading toward it. Every world the conquered had marked as worthless for containing the Tier 1 hazard was, to humanity, a fortress they already knew how to hold. The coordinator listened to Adiz's voice, thinner now, speaking to children who would carry this forward, and she heard the soil ecologist say the thing that would echo through the conquered for the rest of its history. The thing the Ibari would eventually be forced to enter into the taxonomy not as a behavior but as a warning. They thought our weakness was that we feel everything too much, that we can't look away from pain. They were right. We can't look away. That's exactly right. A breath, wet and failing. They just never asked what happens to a species that learns to keep walking anyway. The Thren ambassador Oz Ket resigned his post the day the recordings reached the conquered central archive. He could not say why. His species had no word for what he felt, watching the imagery of the human children being lifted off a world that had killed their parents on purpose, carried toward 100 more worlds that would do the same. He understood, dimly, that he had been part of an experiment and that he had been the variable being tested, not the humans. The conquered had wanted to see whether humanity would break. It had gotten its answer. Humanity would not break. Humanity would choose to break in increments forever, as long as breaking on its own terms was a way to stand in places no one else could stand. The coordinator of the 13th listening station did the only thing left to her. She requested transfer to Housegrove. The request made no sense. The world was dying, the colony emptied, the fields now a grave. The conquered granted it without asking why, because the conquered had stopped being able to predict her too and had learned, in the space of a single colony's life, to fear the thing it could not predict. She walked the fields where 3 Thren warriors had stood trembling and open-eyed. She knelt where Adiz had knelt. She did not understand why she did it. But she pressed her own palm flat against the dirt that had read nothing dangerous to avail, and she waited to feel what the humans had felt, the weight of a single life seen whole. She felt nothing. The soil did not touch her. It had never been about the soil. And that was the last and worst realization, the one the coordinator carried back to the conquered, and could never fully explain to a civilization built on the certainty that strength could be measured and behavior could be mapped. The humans had not found a weapon in the ground. They had found one in themselves, long before they ever reached the stars, in every grief they had survived and every loss they had carried, and every morning they had risen after a night that should have broken them. The soil had only revealed it. The galaxy had spent 9 million years categorizing the small species by what they would do to survive. It had never once asked what a species might do, deliberately, with full knowledge of the cost, simply because surviving was not the only thing it cared about. The conquered did not collapse. Empires built on 9 million years of certainty do not collapse in a single colony's lifetime. But something in it changed, quietly, the way the coordinator's chest had moved the first time she heard a human voice she could not read. The Ibori added a final line to the human file, and it was the only line in the entire taxonomy written not as data, but as something closer to a prayer, and it read, "This species does not stop when stopping is rational. We do not know where its limit is. We have not found evidence that it has one." The coordinator stayed on Housegrove until the world went dark. She watched the human relief convoys leave, one by one, carrying children toward 100 forbidden worlds. She watched the fields die. And on the last night, alone on a world that had taught the galaxy a lesson it would spend the rest of its existence trying to unlearn, she finally let herself feel the thing she had refused to name since the 11-second fragment, the thing the humans felt every day and kept walking through anyway. And she understood at last that it was not fear, and it was not awe, though it contained both. It was grief, for a species that had handed the galaxy a mirror, and shown it, in 9,000 quiet deaths and one badly sung song and a school built under 3 warships, that the most dangerous thing in the universe is not the species that cannot be killed. It is the species that already knows exactly what it is willing to lose, and has decided that the door, once opened, will never again be closed.